Good morning and welcome to News Views. I'm Ravi Baichwal. The March 20th primary in Illinois is just over 2 weeks away now, and newly drawn congressional maps are making for some very interesting races. The 2nd Congressional District is a prime example. This is a district that now includes not only parts of Chicago's South Side, but also stretches further way south, including parts of Kankakee and Will counties. The incumbent Congressman Jesse Jackson Jr. is fighting to keep his job after 8 terms in office, and he is facing former U.S. Representative Debbie Halverson in the Democratic primary. 2 Republicans are vying for a chance to take on either Jackson or Halverson in the November election. James Henry Taylor Sr. is currently a businessman publishing 2 city newspapers, one in Joliet and the other in Kankakee. The other Republican candidate is Brian Woodworth. He holds a law degree, and he is currently a criminal justice professor. This week, Woodworth was endorsed by the Chicago Tribune. Both candidates are with us individually for News Views this morning. And by a coin toss, we're going to begin with Brian Woodworth. Brian Woodworth, thanks very much for joining us. And now we asked you and Mr. Taylor what you actually thought about what was important to voters of the 2nd District. And you gave us 2 primary issues: creating an environment that encourages local and domestic job growth. And you also said that getting America out of debt was another big national issue, of course. And you're also on the record for saying that the United States needs an immigration policy that allows migrant workers legal authorization to work temporarily in the United States and encourages immigrant families to access citizenship. So for a Republican, that is a very bold policy pronouncement. Talk to me about why that's important to you, and do you think it can fly?
Well, when speaking about the immigration policy, having grown up in Michigan, in the farmland of Michigan, many times I experienced and witnessed the migrant workers that had come. They were working the fields and working very hard, and there's almost a national consent or national thought that our immigrants are trying to take advantage of the system, and when they're really not. They're some of the hardest working people that I've ever met. And I believe that a system that could provide an opportunity for them to get a license to come and work legally and earn some money while doing jobs that in many cases Americans don't want to do. They're looking for the higher paying jobs, and we have people who are willing to work the fields. Let's give them that opportunity.
Let's talk a little bit about what concerns everybody, jobs. And you've talked specifically about getting more manufacturing jobs down into these rural urban areas that are going to be part of this new 2nd District. Talk to me about what you think are some plans that you can make happen in Washington.
Well, we have to recognize first that the offshoring of jobs over the past couple of years is actually, many manufacturers are finding that the productivity of the American far outweighs much of the productivity of other nations' workers, and so they're bringing many of those manufacturing jobs back. And my plan, or my thought, is that we need to make sure District 2 has the environment necessary, and we have many of the things we need to bring that. We have highway systems, we have the railroad system. Of course, there's the talk about the airport system that they're pushing.
Let me ask you about the 3rd airport, the Piatone Airport. What's your view on that?
Well, the Piatone Airport has some benefits. I think we have some questions that need to be answered first before we could wholeheartedly say 100% it needs to come. One of the issues I'd like to see answered is there a need for it? Are we actually going to have airlines that are willing to come to it? If we can get commitments, from airline,
they don't have them yet. Airlines are, generally speaking, not in favor of this at all.
Right, and that's what I've been seeing. But again, the other side of that is having an airport on the south side also provides some great transportation for cargo, for manufacturing to come in.
Let me ask you very quickly. You would be new to Washington.
Yes.
Many people say Washington's broken. We hear that from Mitt Romney a lot. Washington's broken. Even the president says the same thing. You would be new. You're a criminal justice professor. What would you bring personally to the way laws are made in Washington to make it work better?
Well, one of the benefits I believe I have is the ability to actually listen to the people of the district. I'm not a politician. I'm not a career politician. I don't have ties to lobbyists, to Washington insiders, and instead I can be a fresh voice coming to it. Plus, my background as a lawyer, I have experience as an advocate, and I'm willing to take that advocacy and be a strong advocate in Washington for the district.
All right. Brian Woodworth, candidate for the 2nd District as a Republican. Thank you very much for your time this morning. And now, as I mentioned, we have both candidates here this morning, and we are going to be talking to the other Republican who's looking for that 2nd congressional nomination, James Henry Taylor Sr., right after a short break. Stay with us. Back to News Views this morning. We are speaking with the Republican candidates running for a spot on the ballot to represent the 2nd Congressional District in Illinois. And that is a spot currently held by Democrat Jesse Jackson Jr. 2 Republicans are on the ballot for the March 20th primary. And just a few moments ago, we heard from one of those candidates, Brian Woodworth. Now, I'm joined by the other candidate in the race, James Henry Taylor Sr. Mr. Taylor, welcome to News Views. Thanks very much for coming in. Now, we asked you earlier to tell us what you think is important to the voters of the 2nd District, and you told us U.S. foreign aid policy needs to be changed, parts of President Obama's health care law need to be re-examined, and you also said that more needs to be done to help poverty-stricken communities in the 2nd District, and you told us that you do not support a 3rd airport in Peatone. So let's get into some of those topics right now. First of all, what do you think the most important issue is for the 2nd Congressional District, and why would you be the person to represent them in Washington?
I think the most important issue is jobs. I think the reason I'd be the person to represent the district in Washington is because I'm a fiscal conservative. And I think the reason we've had problems with jobs is because we, as a government, have overspent and overtaxed business.
What specifically are you proposing in terms of an economic plan?
Well, I think the main thing government has to do is cut back on spending. I think we need to improve the infrastructure, which will provide jobs, as well as would be incentives for businesses to move into the 2nd District.
So you want to cut spending, but you want to spend more money on infrastructure. Where would that money come from?
I think the money would come from the cuts. I think some of the cuts we need to make is in foreign aid. I think this country at one time in history could afford a lot of money for foreign aid. I don't think we're at that spot at this time.
Now, you're on the record as saying that America should get out of Afghanistan because we should not be fighting a war of independence for another nation. But at the same time, you think that we should stay in Iraq because the war for a new government essentially has not completed yet. How do you square those two
roles? I think we should stay there because we've invested so much there, and I think that country owes us, such as the cost of the war in both men and material and our national wealth, and I think they should repay us. One way they can repay us is to allow us to help them develop their natural resources so they will be capable of repaying us.
We should be repaid by them. How would we be repaid by them?
We would be repaid by them by the development of their natural resources, and one of those would be oil and other natural resources that they would have.
But we invaded them.
We also freed them.
Well, that is a debatable point to some people, but you think that because we were there and we occupied, therefore we should take their oil money to pay back the cost of the war here in America?
I think we freed them. And the majority of the people in that country, I believe we freed them from a dictator who was a cruel dictator.
Talk to me a little bit more about federal education policies. You have a great deal of difficulty with the role that the federal government plays in terms of educational policies, and you think that that has not served African Americans well. Tell me about that.
I think the government has developed programs that do not work well for African American children. I think that the teachers that are going into the classrooms are not prepared to teach children that come out of some pretty traumatic situations, and that the government has set up priorities and funding structures that do not enhance the opportunity for the children to have an equal education.
So you talked about cuts. What specific cuts, say, in education would you make?
I think I would cut the duplication in systems. You've got the duplication in superintendents, you've got duplications in various aspects. Some districts could be combined, and that would save money.
All right, so you see a bureaucracy that's bloated here. Is that part of the problem?
That's correct.
All right. Talk to me a little bit about economic development in the 2nd District. You are against this 3rd airport in Peatone. It's something that would clearly be an infrastructure improvement and would clearly bring in jobs. Why are you against it?
Because of the destructive nature of the project on the people of Peatone. It's disrupted an entire community, a community that's been there for quite a while, actually a farming community with about 200 years of farming history. Congressman Jackson seems to be totally unaware of the impact of that project. He claims that there'd be 15,000 jobs. That's debatable.
And you've gone on record as saying that African Americans, as a rule, need to re-examine why they tend to support the Democratic Party. Tell me about that. Obviously, you're in the GOP, but why do you think that?
I believe that they've been shortchanged. We've become a tool taken for granted. One of the things I'll do, should I be successful in the Republican primary, is go into Dalton, Harvey, Chicago, Fort Heights, go into Jesse Jackson's stronghold, and convince African-American voters to the best of my ability that they have been shortchanged by the so-called leaders. And the racism involved. Very recently, Jesse Jackson's support in the clergy, one of the people began to speak about demonic activity on the other side of the, with Debbie Halverson. As you know, in the 2nd District, one of the largest groups is a group that it traditionally has published newspapers and made statements and called white people devils. There's not much difference in Jesse's approach to race politics as it is to the president's approach with Reverend Wright.
Very quickly, is race going to play a factor in the 2nd Congressional District this time around?
Yes, it is.
All right. We'll see what happens. All right. Thank you very much, James Taylor. Thank you for joining us this morning. Let's go back to the anchor desk right now and get a final update on the weather.